Coming to you at your leisure from Flatbush, Brooklyn, this is Nothing is Boring. It's 2018, and you know what that means. I don't. Today's interview is with my good friend Jake Rosenthal. We go into a lot of specifics in the interview, so I won't give you too much in the intro, but Jake was co-owner of a beloved, let's say, institutional independent music venue in New York called Glasslands Gallery. Glasslands closed under sad circumstances, along with a couple of their neighbors who were independent music venues. We get into that a little bit in the interview. But what's important about Jake and about his partners, Rami and Dhruv, is that since Glasslands closed, they've been operating PopGun Presents, which is a booking and promotions company that has a really loyal following in New York and has become famous for booking acts that are right on the cusp of international fame. The reason they've been able to do that is not just because they have great taste, but because they take risks. And what happens is a lot of times they book acts that are so close to popping, as it were, that they have to move the act to a larger room. Just as an example, some of the acts that they booked for their first shows in the US or for the first shows in New York, gave them their first kind of New York opportunities were like MGMT, Yeasayer, Lana Del Ray, Disclosure, Deerhunter, Tame Impala, Jay Reatard, some of these acts that have become really very famous. Since Glasslands closed, they've been working on a new venue. It's called Elsewhere. When I talked to Jake for this interview, it was in September. It was September 12th. It's now January 1st. Happy New Year, everybody. I talked to them when they were, as it turns out, 6 weeks out from opening. They opened on October 31st with a really fun show with battles and Cakes Tequila and a bunch of Future Punks, a bunch of fun acts. But at the time that I talked to Jake, he was very tired. He was very downtrodden because even though it was 6 weeks out, in hindsight, the opening date of the venue was in some indefinite future. I'd been trying to talk to Jake to do this interview for many, many months before that, since the conception of this podcast. But Jake didn't want to do it because he didn't essentially want to jinx the potential opening of this venue. We go into a little bit about what's so hard about creating a venue from scratch in this, but we really don't get into the really ugly stuff about what happens with contractors that don't fulfill obligations and basements that flood in new construction and things like that. Jake went through the ringer with his partners, but they've built a really gorgeous venue. I spent last night, New Year's Eve, there. It was full of happy people. The rooms look beautiful. They're full of artwork. There are currently 2 rooms operating in their new venue Elsewhere in Bushwick, and soon there will be a roof that is quite large as well. It still retained a lot of the homey, handmade, friendly, neighborhoody vibe that made Glasslands so special to so many Brooklyners and even to people from across the pond who came to think of it as their favorite place to see a show and to play shows. I don't have the list in front of me, but if you look on the Wikipedia or click through the blog at hardwork.party, you'll see a really impressive list of acts that have elected to play at Glasslands in the past, at a room, again, that's like maybe 300 capacity when these acts could easily sell out. Really, really large rooms. They elect to play at Glasslands because it's a cozy, homey, neighborhoody spot. And Elsewhere, despite being a much larger venue, has retained a lot of that. So we talk a lot in detail about that. We talk about the bar business. We talk about the cool business. We talk about a lot of things. This is an interesting little snapshot. It's a little moment in time because, again, it's been a while since the venue, 2 months now since the venue actually opened, and a lot has unfolded and a lot has changed since we talked. But it's really interesting to hear the thought process and the kind of internal monologue of somebody who's in the process of building a venue from the ground up. Another interesting thing that's happened since the venue opened is that our mayor, Bill de Blasio, elected to hold an event at Glasslands announcing the ending of a decades-old cabaret law here in New York. A lot of people didn't even know about this, but it was illegal to dance in any venue that didn't have a cabaret license. And this was used for a whole bunch of nefarious purposes on the part of administrations past, a lot of them racially motivated to kind of suppress parts of the New York culture that the city didn't want to further. And it was an unfair law. It was a ridiculous law. It existed for my entire time in New York until just maybe a month ago. There's some great pictures. I'll see if I can put some up on the website of Jake and Rami and Dhruv hamming it up, cheesing it up, as Jake said, with Bill de Blasio at the essentially ribbon cutting for dancing in Brooklyn and in New York. So that's a cool thing to check out too. Check out the website, by the way, hardwork.party, for pictures of the venue, for pictures of Jake, especially pictures of the venue before it's open. You can find a lot online now. We also mentioned something about CBGB's bathroom. That's up on the website as well. At Hardwork Party on Instagram, on Twitter, hit me up. Hardwork.party is the website. Go to the forum. Let me know what you think. Subscribe on iTunes, please, or anywhere you listen. Tell a friend. Rate us 5 stars. It really helps. Please enjoy the interview. It's Jake Rosenthal. I love you. Glasslands had, over the years, all kinds of performances that were like rock, mostly rock, I think. Is that accurate? Mostly rock?
Yeah, mostly rock.
That's not my question, Jake. Rock, jazz, you know, sometimes there was electronic, like parties, electronic acts.
We did rap.
Rap, yeah.
Folk.
Yeah, folk, that's right. I saw some cellos in there every now and then. You had like avant, screamo. Nouveau hair metal.
That's rap.
So like AV acts. There were some lasers. I definitely saw some lasers in there, and punk, you know, etc. When the kind of stuff you present is that eclectic, what is it about the venue that gives it its identity or its, you know, je ne sais quoi?
Well, that's one thing that we always ask ourselves a lot at the space, is that, you know, when you're trying to be a place that's inclusive and catering to a lot of people's tastes, like what at the end of the day actually makes it what it is, you know, what the space is. I always felt like a big part of it was the staff, you know, how people are received when they get there, security, the bartenders, how they treat people. I think the vibe that you get from a place because of the staff and because of the decisions you make in the space, some of which are staff, others are, you know, decor, the way that you run a show, just basically operations decisions and staffing and the way people treat you there, I think is a huge part of like the experience of being in a venue, more so than people think, beyond programming. I think there is also a part of the identity of a place that speaks pretty loudly when you do have diverse programming also. I think that, like, in a weird way, despite the fact that you aren't getting your identity from being a punk club or being like a dance club, I think you are in a separate way getting an identity as being there is something to be said on an identity level for being a place that programs all sorts of different types of music and takes chances on all sorts of different like crowds and communities. And I think that's, in a weird way, I think becomes its own kind of identity as well.
I remember the security was actually third party, right? And you were always kind of in a process of, in a sense, like begging your security vendor to give you people that you had a relationship with and not send you.
Did I tell you about that at the time? Because like that's a really specific thing to know.
Well, we used to talk about it from time to time because like you said, I had a little bit of a relationship with the door guys. I was in and out a lot, and I knew some guys and not others. And from a consumer's experience, whether they realize it or not, security is the first touch point with what the experience of the club's going to be like. And I told you, the first time I went to Brooklyn Steel, which is a new venue here in Brooklyn, I was early and I went to pick up my tickets and then go grab dinner. And I went through security with a friend of mine, and our wives had not gone through security yet. The venue was completely empty. It was probably like 9 p.m. It was totally empty. And we went through like airport-style third-party security. Empty your pockets, the metal detector, everything. These folks were wearing yellow polo shirts that said security or something. It might as well have been like Z or Triple Canopy, from where I was standing, or DHS. And we went through security and stood just inside the lobby, and we're waiting for our wives to come through. And they screamed at us to move. They were like, you cannot wait in this area. And that was our first experience at the venue, and I'm not sure it'll be a very long time before I can have
a purely positive opinion of Brooklyn Steel, no matter how good that room is.
Right.
Because of that very first contact with them was so impersonal and rude.
Security is your first experience at a club.
What are you going to do about that with your new venue here?
So, well, I quickly want to talk about security just in general as an outside, as a third party thing, which is that like when you're a venue, it's much easier to hire a third party security company because they're licensed, bonded, secured. They've been doing it for a long time. They've got the guys.
Yeah.
It takes the whole headache and then the liability, most importantly, off your plate. So
Right.
it's a very easy decision to make to just shop to one of these companies.
Shop till you drop.
Shop till you drop for the security.
Brand security.
And boy, do you drop because like you said, it's very expensive to go with the outside security companies. But then also you're always in this battle where that you're trying to get their best employees, because they've got these rosters of 100 guys, 120 guys, security employees that are on their rosters, and you're always essentially in a competition as one of their clients with their other clients for their best guys, their best trained guys, their most friendly guys, the guys that are, smart enough to understand how to do their job without making people feel uncomfortable like that. And so if you're not building your own in-house staff, you really end up in this weird dynamic where, you've got these guys that are so important to your venue that are, like you said, your greeters for the club who aren't really part of the team. And it's kind of this weird dynamic where for something that's so important, you've got these people who are sort of guests in your space at the same time.
Yeah.
And from week to week, you might, someone might show up that you have to retrain on the spot because they're a new guy with the company and they're not like your regular guy or whatever it might be. And then people leave, people come, people go through these companies. And so it can be very hard to feel like for everybody else, you've vetted people, you've hired them specifically for the role at your venue. They've integrated into your team. They've been there for a while. And it's always sort of a tsunami in and out of security when you're using someone else. So here at the new space, we're going to be trying to build an in-house security team, which is a huge challenge.
Oh my, I did not know that.
Yeah.
You're opening sometime in the near future. Have you started that process already?
The security?
Yeah.
Very soon.
And what
it's going to take about a month and a half.
Do you put out a Craigslist ad like, nobody under 230 pounds need apply?
Yeah.
Must be able to
that's how it starts.
Crush a basketball in your palm.
Yeah, We're putting that out.
I mean,
next week.
Is it job discrimination? Only hire giant people for security? Is that legal?
That's a good question.
I never really understood.
That's a good question.
Where the job qualification? It's like nobody's gonna take you to court for like not hiring a model because she doesn't or he doesn't look like whatever you want them to look like.
Right.
So the gap between their incisors isn't big enough.
Right. I also wonder that on the male-female ratio, right, for security.
For security, sure.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Well, I actually tend to have better interactions with female security guards, but I'm not getting kicked out of venues.
Yeah.
At which point, like, the friendliness thing is no longer the qualification. It's whether or not, you can bodily lift someone and prevent them from hurting you at the... You don't want somebody who's like, I'm a scrapper and I can really take my licks, but I give them two. No. It's like, no, you just...
No, funny enough, like the for hire security market, I think, is full of probably 50% those types of people as little as you want them on your team,
Yeah.
They're out there.
I applied for a bouncer job when I was fresh out of college at this nightclub in my hometown. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a big guy for those of you who can't see me right now, which is everybody but Jake. But I was like, I'm a black belt in karate. I've been doing Muay Thai for 4 years. I got a good amount of grappling experience. And they're like, I don't want you to roundhouse someone in the head.
Right. That's
not how you diffuse.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. The reason a good security guard is hard to find is because it's this weird mix of they've got to be big enough to kick someone's ass, but smart enough to never have to.
Yeah.
And
the best gun is one you never have to use.
Right.
That's not a phrase, but I did
sound pretty good.
It sound pretty good. The cadence that one would say.
It's a phrase now.
Yes. There's a way to say something like that implies that someone already knows how it's finished.
Exactly. That was a quotation.
I'm just going to finish it.
And so, every once in a while you find that guard who can be yelled at in the face by someone who's like on PCP.
Yeah.
And who is, physically intimidating enough to not be a challenge to fight to people, to deter a fight, but never really have to get into it, never have to ultimately scrap with someone because they're smart enough to de-escalate and they have like the emotional intelligence to de-escalate situations.
The former venue that you ran, Glasslands, was on a block, on a corner, that it shared with two other venues that were, in a certain sense, similar but different. There was 285 Kent, there was Death by Audio in the same building. Did you ever consciously make a decision deliberately to do something to distinguish yourself from those other venues?
I don't know if it was conscious, but I think at Glasslands, when we took over, we didn't open Glasslands. We took it over in 2011, but we started working there in 2008, very shortly after it opened, a year and a half or so. But I don't think there was very much of a comparative thing happening between the spaces there, at least in my experience of running Glasslands. I think for us, it was just we wanted it to be true to us and to the staff that we had there, and to us that meant doing our best to try to make it as safe and as legal as we could possibly make it, given the the resources we had and the circumstances.
I'm not sure I've ever heard the phrase "as legal as possible."
One thing that people do not understand enough about building code and having a public gathering space in New York is that everyone exists on a spectrum of legality.
The world is gray. As the great Tom Clancy said in A Clear and Present Danger, the world is gray, sir.
Is this another one of your...
I think this was a conversation between Harrison Ford and the president. I may be getting the movie wrong. Write in, let me know if I'm off about that one. Jake, I don't mean to interrupt. Go on. Legality is a sliding scale from jail to what? Who's really who's on the up and up?
Yeah, I think your best case scenario. Yeah, no, I think so. Yeah, I think most of the legitimate venues out there that present themselves as music venue businesses are on the up and up.
But legality or permissibility is extremely site specific, right? Because there's a code to which a brand new building could be built, and then it would more or less be rubber stamped when it opened,
right?
But nobody builds that way. And so every wonky, slightly unsafe detail that goes into a real building or that comes out of the process of turning a real building into something that it wasn't originally intended to do,
right?
Or in the process of building something from scratch as you make all these alterations, these things come out. Those are things, if I'm not mistaken, that an inspector will point out and say, if you do X, Y, and Z to this thing, I will allow you to do this thing that is not to code, right?
I think it's more, not exactly. I mean, I think at the end of the day, at the end of the day, to open a place, you need a stamp from the Department of Buildings on one of a billion pieces of paper, right? One on a couple, 100 pieces of paper, right? How you get there through the course of your design, build, and inspection, permitting and building and then inspection, it's not always a clear path. It's not always a clear, these are the 200 things you need to do to get this rubber stamp. A lot of it, in my experience, comes down to the particular knowledge of that inspector or the particular knowledge of that plan examiner, what they did or didn't notice that day when they were examining your plans, what they did or didn't notice that day when they were inspecting your building.
Yeah,
it's certainly not a foolproof process, But at the end of the day, typically what happens is they come in, you've built something. Let's say you've filed your plans, they've been examined. Okay, they meet code or they don't, and then you have to go back and redraw them or something. So they give you a permit, and then you apply for a permit. Once the plan's been approved, you get your permit to build. Your contractor gets your permit, then you start building, and then the back end of the building process, you basically go back to the Department of Building and say, hey, we built this thing. Come check it and stamp it and say, yes, it was built to these approved drawings I showed you last year, right? And when they come, there's a universe of a billion things that could be wrong, right? Literally, it's endless amounts of things that could be an inch off in the code, or could be something that your architect didn't notice or the plan examiner didn't notice, and so their job is to come back and be like, basically everything was done correctly, but here's a list of things that I noticed while I was there that weren't, and that doesn't mean that they saw every exhaustive list of things that were not to code when they came in. It just means they saw these 15.
Yes.
And go fix them, and then when you're done fixing those 15, we'll give you the stamp. And so left in the dust is the hundreds of things that, minute things that may or may not have been wrong.
But the concern is that when they come back to see those 15 things that they noticed the first time, they may notice a whole bunch of new things. I've had inspections where fire marshal shows up, nobody knew exactly when they were going to come. They knew generally they were going to come this week, whatever. They show up, you're at whatever state of preparedness, and it's like a sitcom in that one person is leading the fire marshal, And as they try to act casual and saunter around with them, there are 2 or 3 people in front of them running and like clearing fire egresses and like locking doors that need to be locked and turning on lights that need to be on. And then behind them, there are people, looking at you over their shoulder, like trying to define what needs to be done next, whatever it is, in a really farcical Neil Simon kind of way.
You're doing your best.
Yeah.
And it can be stressful in that exact way.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's really personal. Do you do anything like have a snack for does it seem, are they sensitive to you trying too hard? Do they think you're trying to hide something or butter them up?
They're all totally different. They're all totally different. They're human beings, man. I always got the sense that if they showed up and they're really frustrated that day or they're hungry or they didn't get much sleep or something, that it's going to be a lot harder inspection than if not. It's that I've always gotten the sense it's kind of like that. Some guys show up and they're taking no excuses. They're taking no bullshit.
No guff.
If you're a minute late preparing something for the inspection or the test or whatever it might be, they're ready to walk, and you wasted their time. Some guys are like that. Other guys come in and they just want us to make sure that things look pretty safe.
So your old building, Vice bought, right, in 2015? Does that sound right?
They didn't buy it. They leased it.
Okay. But this is 2015 or so? It's like 2 years ago, maybe?
2015 is when we were out of there.
And I'm assuming cut short your run at Glasslands that you had intended, but you had bigger plans anyway. But if 2-3 years into you're taking over Glasslands that had happened, I'm assuming you would have gone on to do a new venue. You don't know. Interesting. My question was going to be, what would your new venue have looked like then versus what you're doing now? And this ties into New York changes constantly. Williamsburg changed dramatically in the last 5 years. We're at Elsewhere, your new venue in Bushwick. Bushwick has changed drastically over that time and is still rapidly changing. But also, you're getting older. How old are you now?
30.
And you took over Glasslands when you were, 24?
Well, when we took it over, I would have been... 2011. So 24. We started working there when we were like 22 or something.
Yeah. These questions all kind of have to do with a bunch of different variables. One is like New York changing, but another one is your changing perception of New York and what you want.
Yeah.
You're in the, among other things, you're in the cool business. And when in 2008, you were a baby and you were within a certain target market, especially for that kind of venue. You had all ages shows, right?
No.
You never did?
Glasslands never had all ages
well, that's a distinguishing factor.
Pretty
between
interesting,
you and
right?
your neighbors.
Yeah.
But how old were you when you took over the venue? Or when you started working there, let's see, 2008?
Like 21 or something.
That's a demo that goes out a lot, that goes to shows, but has a completely different set of wants and aesthetic and everything than the 30-year-old that you are now. Do you have numbers that you work from or stats or anything that... Do you know who the concert-going market is in New York?
We don't have any numbers we work off, but I think we work off our experience, right?
Yeah.
So, I'd say that by the time people get to my age, most of them are not going out to a bunch of shows a week. I think that's safe to say. I think that, I would say that the vast majority of the people that were at Glasslands for shows and for parties were probably 19 to late 20s, 28.
So when you first started, you were right in the beginning of the target demo.
Yeah.
And now you're almost out of it. What's changed about your relationship to who you're booking, to how you put the venue together? I'm sure in a certain sense, your ability to understand that market was probably as impaired as a 21-year-old as it is as a 30-year-old.
Yeah, very much.
But would you have done things differently then, or do you think that you knew better then than you do now in any way?
That's a good question. I don't think we were thinking when we were like 21, 22. I don't think, put it this way, we were not thinking about really anything we were doing as a quote unquote business, And so as such, we weren't thinking about target markets. We weren't thinking about demos. We really probably, even at that time, were not even thinking who these people were on our mailing list, honestly. I'm pretty sure we did not, outside of just our own experience at the events, at the shows, at the parties, watching who the people were and seeing that they were friends and friends of friends and friends of friends of friends, I think that was our only intuitive sense of who was coming to this place and who. I don't think we were not organizing a mailing list, we weren't targeting people, we were doing no critical thinking about that whatsoever. And I don't think we really needed to at that time because it was small. The space was small. It's like we weren't really ever. It's not like we had some 1,000 capacity space that we needed. Like we needed to find a new market for or something like that. So it was a relatively small space because our resources were low. Therefore, our overhead was low. The whole thing was a little bit of like a sandbox kind of environment. So we never, I think, were under the we didn't really have the pressure to make it a high-performing business in any way, so we just weren't thinking about those things, I think. Now, I think it's much different. Like now, first of all, this place is way bigger. There's multiple performance areas. There's a cafe business in here. There's an art gallery that
you have investors.
We have real grown-up.
You got a nut to
investors.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we got to pay people back. We didn't have that at Glasslands, really.
Yeah.
I mean, we did a little bit. I mean, we bought it from the previous owners. But, we'd already seen the place running for a while. We knew what we could afford in that sense. So it was really more just every week that we would make money, we'd give a percentage of that back to the previous owner. That was how we bought it. It was very ramshackle,
Right.
turnkey kind of. It was like a bunch of kids doing, math on the back of an envelope, and sort of trying to figure that out.
I saw a filing cabinet in there. I think you had a safe.
There was a safe and a filing cabinet. That was I think the apex of our business.
There was a lock on the audio closet.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was ever locked.
Except for that you could just rip it. It was like ramshackle wood. You could just rip it all down. So this is very different in that way. The new venue is how we've changed. Is that we're older and. I think that it has given us a lot of perspective about who an independent music venue in a city like this, in a city at this time, who is it trying to serve? What is its place in a community? These are the things we're thinking about now. I think that we weren't thinking about when we were 21. Because I think as you build a bigger space and as you get older, I think you start to think about what you're doing outside of the very narrow perspective of what your personal tastes are and what your personal interest is and who your 100 friends are. And I think that's the biggest shift I think that's been happening in our little crew, doing what we do over the last 10 years, let's say. I think at the time it was like a little in-crowd thing for who we were and who our friends and our friends of friends and this community that we were in and that we wanted to kind of find a way to serve. And I think we did a really good job doing that, honestly. And I think that like in a way that made us really happy on that level, and people liked that place and our staff were our friends and we had a really good time, But I think, as we get older, I think it starts to become more about like how can we serve people than how can we repeat the days of our being 21. It's like not really about that,
Yeah.
I feel like it becomes different in that way.
As a big venue, and this is a much bigger venue, your peer group.
Sorry,
Jake's been trying to get this one fruit fly for a while. We're in the cafe.
That's a mosquito.
It could be a skeeter.
There are no fruit flies in the cafe. Does the health department listen to this podcast?
Yeah. I don't know if anybody listens to it. As a bigger venue, your peer group, and by peer group I mean competition. I don't know that I know it comprehensively, but by and large are less independent venues. You're competing with venues that are owned by groups that own multiple venues and are, bigger dogs. How do you relate to your competition that way? Especially because your identity as a booking company and for those that don't know, PopGun and Glasslands and Elsewhere are all, in a certain sense, the same group-ish. PopGun.
Yeah, ish.
PopGun is a promotion company that books all kinds of venues around New York and will be booking here and Elsewhere. So you've had a working relationship with these other venues, not just collegial, but you've actually been in bed together. When shows got too big at Glasslands, you would take them to another venue, still under PopGun's umbrella, but you'd take them to one of these other big venues. And now you're head to head, and I would assume that you're going to try to distinguish yourself in some way. How do you see Elsewhere fitting into the landscape of mid-cap venues here in New York? That's like smaller than the Studio at Madison Square Garden, smaller than T5, but as big, if not bigger, than almost every other independent venue in New York, right? Yeah,
well, I think, for one, despite the fact that the venue is big, no individual area in the venue is a massive space, and I think that's something that we built the space. In that way, it was built on purpose from day one, because what we liked about running a space like Glasslands, which was small, relative to the size these things can be, is we got to work with emerging artists, and we got to work with acts that were playing their first time in New York, or their first, in a lot of cases for bands from the UK or whatever, it would be their first time in New York. And like, that has always been something that we just like doing. I think if you start building a club that's 1,000 capacity, and by that I mean a room that is 1,000 capacity and up, 1,200, 1,800, like Brooklyn Steel or something, I think that's really when you're getting into the realm of competition on a New York scale with these kind of like Boweries or AEGs or Live Nations or something. I think we like to sort of hide just underneath that, and I don't think we really kind of have. I don't think we'd be incredibly excited to do something at a 1,200 capacity scale for a lot of reasons.
What would be different if you were running a room that big? You would have to make decisions based on marketability, right? A lot more than
I
risk.
think that like I said, I think you start getting at a venue that size, you probably start have to thinking about bidding wars with these large corporate rooms. You probably have to start thinking about just marketability of stuff. You're probably well outside in a lot of cases your own taste for music at that point, and very often if you're thinking about something that can sell 3,000 tickets, I mean, how many acts that you love that tour the city on a regular basis are doing, And it's not to say you can't fill a great calendar, at that scale with stuff that is great music, but it's really hard and it's really competitive. I think that we play a different. I think we want to play a different role. I think with a space like this, I think that the independent spirit of what we're doing is really important, and I think put it this way, it's probably very, very difficult to carry an independent spirit to a business that large.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of what I'm saying, and I think that like this space elsewhere is a big experiment in how large you can make an independent business.
Right.
I think that's kind of I think that's sort of what we're trying to see. How much can we bring the independent spirit to a space that can serve as many people as in as many communities as this place plans to.
How often do you book acts that you don't like?
It definitely happens.
What goes into that decision?
I think that, the tug that you're always getting when you're doing any sort of art business, like a music venue or like a concert promoter, is that if everything you do is your taste in a niche way, then you're probably not going to, be around very long. I think it's very, very difficult to be a purist in art and music related businesses. Let's put it that way. Like take a record label, right? A record label is able to take chances on smaller run, emerging, smaller artists because they've got a record that really hit and they sold, hundreds of thousands of copies of, and they can take those resources in order to grow.
It's like the Soderbergh, like one for you, one for them thing.
I think that like there's to be a place that is sustainable and is able to take those chances. I think there's a balance. And I think that it's easier to sell, it's easier to sell tickets and make money on stuff that is broader, has a broader audience and is more mainstream. And so I think one for them, one for me kind of thing.
How often are you booking acts that have no infrastructure around them, that have no management, where you're dealing with the artist directly?
Less and less.
Is that a function of the size of the acts that you're booking? Or?
Not entirely. It's a function of, I would say it's a function of the size, yes, but also the industry. Bands are getting, quote unquote, teams, agents, managers, publicists, all this stuff immediately these days.
You mean earlier in their careers?
Yeah, very, very early in their careers. Huh. Compared to 10 years ago.
Why is that? All other indications, the music industry going the direction that it's going, or so we're told, you would think that there'd be less infrastructure around bands. No, I think it's the opposite. I think and I don't know really. It's not like I've ever actually been a part of the music industry, in a certain level. Like I've never worked at a record label. I've never worked at a publicist. But you're actually at the part of the music industry where they do make money, right?
Yeah, no, but what I mean is I don't have the direct experience. I've never really been in like in another, let's say another business that and sort of felt what it feels like to be in like a proper I think music venues kind of sit at the outskirts of the music industry. And I don't mean to say that there's not money in them, but that like they kind of there's sort of like a touch point in the music industry that an artist touches along the career, the path of their career. But the music venue is not where you're making the album deal. It's not where you're making the radio deal. It's not where you're making the distribution deal.
Not according to all the movies I've seen, man. The A&R guy hanging out in the back.
I mean, it might literally be the place you're making those deals, but it's not. It's not a factor, right? It's not a factor in the things that decide the stuff that happens in the music industry. So it's like what I'm saying is like it's a little outpost on the corner of the music industry that people come in and then they leave. They come in and they leave. What I'm saying is that I don't really have the experience. I wouldn't. I'm just all that to say I'm prefacing my explanation of what I think the music venue is, the way it's behaving right now, from like a with like a telescope looking in, because I'm not in these meetings, I'm not in these offices, but I think that it's the opposite, which is that as the industry becomes harder and harder for musicians and for everybody really, I think the pie is getting smaller and smaller, and so it actually you do yourself you have to get in at the ground level on an act that's going to be successful earlier and earlier. I think that agencies, managers, publicists, all the industry, I think, feels like the onus to attach themselves to artists way earlier now because there's fewer and fewer chances.
Yeah,
I think. And so I think that people scramble because it really, once you've got the infrastructure, let's say you're like a touring agency or you're like a manager or whatever, is once you've got the infrastructure, it doesn't cost you all that much to sign a group. Yes, you have to be paying attention and you have to be doing the work, but like if you've got any inkling that a band is going to be, is going to blow up in some way, it kind of behooves you to get there early. Probably more and more so as like the pie for the music industry kind of like gets smaller. You know what I mean?
It's probably nothing like it, but it's kind of making me think of like the pop farm system in Asia, where like they're scouting kids from their third grade yearbook.
It's like the NBA, right? It's like they're
exactly.
like the talent scouts are going to like like elementary schools now. Like
this kid's got a hell of a slider.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like he's 4. It's like, but trust me, I'm in this business 35 years. Are beyond being in the promotions business, beyond being in the cool business, as we mentioned.
Because I'm so cool.
Because you're so cool. You're in the booze business here.
That's the main business, yeah.
It is, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, anybody that's in hospitality is in the booze business. Mm-hmm. How do you pick what goes into that side of the business? So how do you choose what your offering is? How does that influence the rest of your business? I know choosing what you offer obviously says something about you in the same way that your staff does, in the same way that your decor does. Mm-hmm. But it also has a huge impact on your business model. And in a certain sense, the bar, more than anything, is this really simple kind of chemistry in the sense that, like, for example, you had a Negroni on the menu at Glasslands, and I think that was a good seller for you guys. I'm assuming it just showed up one day. Somebody was like, we should make a Negroni.
Yeah, Rami wanted to make a Negroni. That's all.
But the Negroni, I don't even know what the hell goes into it. It's like spumante and gin or something?
Like Campari and, something like that. Gin,
whatever.
Lemons or orange zest, yeah.
And I would assume that at the beginning you didn't sit down and do a spreadsheet and say, what does a Negroni cost us? No. What's our profit on a Negroni? And how long does it take the bartender to make it?
If we were smart, we might have.
But that is what's going on with a bar business, right? So you have a new venue opening up. We're in one of your bars right now, and I see you big back bar. We talked about taps. Maybe we should talk about that in a second. But how do you decide what's going to go on this back bar? How do you decide if there's going to be a menu on the wall? How do you decide what the cocktails on offer are?
Yeah. So it should be said that there's a very big difference between a music venue bar and a cocktail, and a bar. Sure. Or let's say like you could split them into a million categories, but like, for the purpose of like,
no, there's only 2 categories.
There's only for the purpose of thinking about this kind of thing. Music venue bar sits, in a lot of ways, there are a different set of rules for a music venue bar than there are for like even a dive bar or that's on its own, or a cocktail bar or something, right? Like for a music venue bar, what you're thinking about is, you're thinking about speed, because unlike a bar, you're open for a couple hours while an event's happening.
Are we talking about cocaine?
Yeah, speed. Yeah, speed.
Okay. That is what
you're mostly thinking about. Speed. You know? I'm mostly always thinking about speed. So
okay, no, you got to serve quickly, but you got to do that in every bar.
No, but it's different though, because in a music venue bar, you're open relative to let's say a dive bar, right? You're open a lot, fewer hours. You hear the dynamics of a music venue bar. You're open in a much shorter period of time. People are in your space while they're seeing a show.
Right.
Secondly, they're captive, meaning that they didn't come because it's a good cocktail. They came because they bought a ticket for the band. And they rush to the bar between sets.
Yeah.
So you've got a dynamic where, if you're using that 20 minutes between acts to make a few signature cocktails, you've blown your business. So music venue bar tends to have, relative to other bars, small, shorter, narrower offerings.
Yeah.
Stuff that doesn't need a ton of prep, and stuff that can just move fast over the bar. Because, like I said, at the end of the day, it's a little bit like, the bad ones will play to that dynamic 100%, right? So it's like think about like the stadium mentality, right? Like all the way at the other end of the spectrum is the stadium, which is just kind of like, fuck you, it's $14 for a Bud Light because you've got literally no other option, and fuck you.
Yeah.
So there's that. And so I think that like the choices you make, knowing that dynamic, the choices you make as a music venue probably says a lot about you, right?
Yeah.
Because
it certainly does.
Because, and this does play out like at music venues all over the place, right? And usually the bigger, the more it does, where you're kind of like, there's one beer on offer. It's a little bit more expensive than it should be. And that's the way it is, And so I think that like you have to take all those things into account when you're putting together your offering, when you're figuring out how you want to serve people and what you're serving people and what the price is going to be. And I think that it is, to the best of an independent business's ability, it's one of the things you're thinking about is, how do I not use that dynamic to take advantage of people? I think it's kind of on you as an independent business, I think, to say, hey, what can we actually afford here? Like, how good of a price can we offer being a, if we're trying to be a spot that feels like a neighborhood spot, that feels like a community place, that has an offering for someone who's not, they already paid $20 at the door. They maybe don't have another $20 to buy, to spend on drinks. That tends to be, like kids who are our age when we started going to venues, right? So it's like, so how do you make sure that you're not pricing out the people you actually want to be there with all these things at play? And I think that, probably the bigger you get and the more corporate you get, probably the more you see that as leaving money on the table, and you sort of will push that dynamic to its logical conclusion. Sure. But on this end of the spectrum, I think you try to give some of that value back to people and make them feel like it's a place that, they want to be at. Yeah. I mean, if you tease your numbers out long enough, you're probably going to find also that there's a break point where it's like, if my beers are $8, the average person's going to have 2 and resent me. But if my beers are $6, the average person might have 3 and have a good time. That's always the thing you're trying to figure out. Yeah. And I think that, and like, I don't, there are probably scientists who do this. Like, like they're probably like hospitality people who are really all about this and do this math and do this thinking and the data. So far in our experience, it's really been more of, it's been more intuition that we've, and I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. I'm just saying, like, we sort of watch the crowd, like get feedback from people, just hear stories from other, from friends of friends about, how they felt or how their friend felt at the bar, or like, you just hear stuff like, oh, it's kind of expensive. And like, oh, okay, maybe that was a little, maybe we priced that a little too high. You kind of, you internalize it a little bit and you adjust or whatever. So that's kind of been the way we've done it in the past, just sort of gut checks. What's going on the menu here? So yeah, the thing I was going to say is that here at Elsewhere, which is different than Glasslands, is we've got the venue space bars, but we've also got this cafe loft bar, which is going to be open during the day and then sort of become a more of like a seated bar lounge during the performances, like a hideaway area. And so up here, we're thinking about, since it's not connected to the performance area and because it'll be open when they're not, we're thinking about what we can do with this bar that is a little bit different from that dynamic downstairs. You got the guy with the tie tucked in between the buttons on his shirt, right? Who you mean the shaker guy? Yeah. Exactly. We're thinking about maybe having a couple shaker guys. Guy with a mustache. But you know what I mean? Like up here, we're thinking about maybe going with some offerings that are not sort of more just like high volumes venue bar stuff downstairs. Sure. Try to give people a place where they can get a slightly better drink up here and take a place where the bartender can take 2 seconds of time and really like make a drink, which has not really been our thing in the past. Give me some of your favorite venues of all time. That I've been to? Yeah. The old. What venue is on your favorite list that you have not been to? We're music venue like history nerds. Okay. So so we, a lot of a lot of what we, inspired us.
Wembley Stadium.
Exactly. A lot of what, inspired the design of this place and the culture that we want to have here does come from like talking to people who were at clubs in other, decades in this city and other cities, and just doing research in that way, sort of cultural research.
Okay, but the venues you have been to then?
I like the old Knitting Factory, the one that was like a pirate ship.
Yeah, that was like 3 stories.
Yeah, three rooms.
Yeah.
Always felt like, sort of like the rickety, it felt like a pirate ship.
Yeah, this was downtown on like Walker or something. South of Canal.
It was Leonard, no?
Maybe Leonard, yeah.
I might be wrong.
Right. No, I think you're right.
I did get to go to Don Hill's a couple times before it closed.
Uh-huh.
It was a pretty amazing place in its own way.
What was special about that?
It just kind of had that old, kind of like old New York style of a venue.
You mean covered in grime?
Yeah.
And graffiti?
Yeah, unpretentious.
And stickers?
A little bit. Yeah, from that. Sort of like the leftover 70s vibe kind of feel. I'm trying to think. I'm kind of blanking on clubs.
How about CBGB?
I never went.
You never went?
Never went.
And you were in New York during the time that was open?
Well, not when people really like talked about it too highly.
Well, I mean,
I should have gone.
Should have gone.
Yeah. No, I never went to CBGB. Never saw it. Although our architect here worked on helping legalize CBGBs in the early 90s.
I'm really surprised to hear that it was ever legal.
Well, I don't know that they got it fully. I don't really know if it was ever fully legalized, but he was part of the process of like working on it.
For me, aside from the kind of accretion of cruft that was on every surface in that place, which was definitely iconic in and of its own, and definitely only iconic places really get that far, like Geno's East in Chicago or whatever. It's that kind of thing. Aside from that, the thing that I remember most about CBGB is first of all, you get to the bathroom. If I remember correctly, you get to the bathroom like basically the door to the bathroom is directly next to the stage.
Yeah, I've heard that.
It's like you
heard that quite a bit.
Are on stage when you're entering or exiting the bathroom, and inside the bathroom, the only toilet was like up 2 steps with no door.
What?
Just like a throne. And you go in the bathroom and like if someone was on, they're just.
When did you go?
I don't remember. I don't know. Early aughts, probably.
Yeah.
And I don't remember who I saw there. Probably the Rolling Stones, I think.
Yeah, probably. You probably saw the Rolling Stones there.
What are some strong feelings you have about what you do? Like, what are your first principles?
Strong feelings? How do you mean?
If you were sitting down a young someone who wanted to get into the biz, and you're not giving them advice for success, you're giving them advice for how to do this right.
Yeah. Build venues or throw shows?
Throw shows. I like that.
That's what we do, throw shows. I would say every act on a bill is important. I think that's an important part of putting a lineup together that is sorely overlooked. I think it's easy to book a headliner, obsess about the headliner selling tickets, and then think that the rest of the lineup is an afterthought.
Yeah.
I think all the best shows that we've ever done have been the best because it had that compounding effect where every act was supposed to be there, for that show. Definitely take chances. I think it's actually easier to find acts that can sell a lot of tickets and fill a space with no staying power for you, in a sense. You have some nights that there's like 20 people there. That's what I'd say. Don't be afraid of that.
Tots. Could be. This isn't even a question. I'm just going to tell you something here, Jake. Tater tots, that tot money, is something I've been very frustrated to see you leave on the table since the day we met.
Talk about leaving stuff on the table.
I was not going to just leave this hanging out there without getting it on the record. You need to get that tot money, Jake. Tater tots.
Yeah, you've been telling me about this.
Brought this up before.
Yeah, this has been actually a pretty consistent fixture of our conversations for probably 3 to 4 years now.
Yeah.
As we've been building this venue.
Yeah.
How does the tot business work? I'm gonna turn this around on you.
Okay, I like this.
What?
Nobody's interviewing me. I'm glad you
What would
asked.
you say if you were sitting down a young somebody?
Yeah.
And you were giving them advice,
doing that.
not for success.
This is for success though.
But for how to do it right. What would you?
Well, don't undercook them. That's the first thing. You're gonna want to get them out. There's gonna be a line for the tots.
High volume.
There's gonna be a line for the tots. You need to let the line do what it's gonna do. If you need to buy another fryer, but don't go serving undercooked tots. They gotta be crispy. Maybe even a little bit on the dark side. You know what I mean? Because at first somebody's gonna be like, these are a little darker than I wanted.
They'll come around.
They're gonna come around. And
so don't be afraid to take chances.
Here's what's gonna carry those darker tots, Jake. Here's why the darker tots are gonna work. The toppings. It's all about, you're not selling tots, Jake. You're selling a dream. And the dream is pizza tots. The dream is tots with Parmigiana.
Can you do like brat style tots?
You can do you can follow your dreams.
Like mustard and
of course.
like sauerkraut.
I'm getting hungry just hearing that.
Sounds pretty good.
It sounds fantastic. Your imagination will run wild once you allow the tots into your life. But what I don't want to see is for you to get involved in all this. And when I say all this, I'm pointing my finger in a circle, pointing up. But
kind of
really,
like a lasso.
But really what I mean
motion.
Is this giant business that you've just embarked on here with your wonderful friends.
But forgot the one thing.
And you're leaving all that Todd money on the table. Goddamn.
I became the one thing
you know what would break my heart?
that I always despised.
Is if
I'm not a tot seller.
Another venue opens up across the street doing just what you're doing.
In that lot over there?
It's in that empty lot next door. And they got tots. And all that tot money.
Well, the thing I've never understood about this tot conversation that we keep relitigating is you talk a lot of shit about tots, but
I don't have a
you've
venue.
got the opportunity. But you've got the opportunity.
No.
If you're such a tot entrepreneur,
don't tempt me.
Where's your tot?
It's a big Bushwick. All right, I don't want to be that guy going in across. I want this for you.
You're trying to sell the dream.
Venue to show
trying
you,
to sell the dream.
Show you what tots are about. I'll do it, but I don't want to, Jake. Well, cool. This was fun. I think there's some shake on it.
We're doing a handshake.
Shake on it. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Noah.
Thanks, Jakers.
Isn't Jake the best? He's the best. I love you, Jakers. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the way I met Jake several years ago was that Glasslands had an iconic sculpture known as the Clouds that was made out of crepe paper and Christmas lights. It had this beautiful ethereal quality to it, really warm quality. It was completely illegal, totally a fire trap, and eventually the fire marshal got fed up with it and told him to take it down. As soon as they did, I think that the following day, they got in touch with me through a friend. I build installation artwork. They wanted to talk about replacing it. So I and our mutual friend Jason Fellows and Jake and a whole bunch of other folks banded together to build the piece known as the Tubes that was all over the ceiling at Glasslands. At the time, if you want to see more about it, you can go to the website hardwork.party. There's a case study up. You can check it out. As always, I'm going to hit you with a little bit of Wikipedia arcana. This one is actually the concept that first blew my mind on Wikipedia. I distinctly remember the late night I spent clicking from entry to entry, having my mind shattered over and over again, eventually culminating in my first reading about the concept of the singularity, which is now pretty widely known. But the concept that got me into this was the concept of stellar husbandry or star lifting. So this is entirely theoretical. It's basically science fiction, but there's a conjecture that a civilization will grow in its use of energy to consume all the energy that their star provides to the surface of their planet. There's a scale for this. It's called the Kardashev Scale. That would be a Kardashev Type 1 civilization. A Type 2 civilization would be one that uses all of the energy of their star. So that would be most likely done by the construction of something hypothetically known as a Dyson sphere, which would be a construction of some kind that encompasses the star and harnesses its energy for the uses of the civilization. Type 3 would be one that civilization that uses all of the energy available in their galaxy, or a galactic civilization. Totally hypothetical, proposed in 1964 by Soviet astronomer Nikolai Kardashev. The things that would be required in order to become a galactic civilization come to mind as soon as you start thinking about the logistics of this, but they're collectively known as star lifting or stellar husbandry, which would be, let's say, a bigger star burns faster, but not necessarily more efficiently. It will burn through its fuel faster. So maybe a civilization would remove some of the material from the star in order to feed it to another star that is dying, let's say, or to just prevent the star from burning too quickly, or to get it to the optimal rate. It would maybe drag a star closer to an orbit that it wants it in, or combine stars. All sorts of things you could think of. These entries are pretty crazy to think about and have been worked out in terms of the math in some detail. While this is science fiction, it is science. It's worth checking out. It will blow your mind. All right, please tune in next episode when I talk to Richard Morales. Rich runs Superfine Audio. He's a mastering engineer. He cut his teeth at The Lodge, one of the world's most renowned mastering facilities, where he worked on Grammy-winning records. He worked on Foo Fighters, Vampire Weekend, Sia. He now runs his own mastering agency. We talk a lot about gear. We talk a lot about listening. We talk a lot about the subjectives of the mastering process. It's very interesting. If you don't know about mastering, this will be pretty eye-opening for you. Please tune in, tell a friend, rate us 5 stars. Thank you so much for listening. Happy New Year. I hope 2018 is the best year of your life. I'm contractually obligated to say that all of our music is by the great Breakmaster Cylinder. I'm not obligated, but nonetheless elect to say that Breakmaster Cylinder is objectively tremendous. I love you.